Welcome to the YouTube video that goes with a Zelda scarf. This is a one colour brioche stitch scarf. I'll show you the right side, sorry. So this is the right side. It's knitted with a selvage edge, left and right. This is the lovely leaf design. And this is the wrong side, so it has a slightly different leaf design but is completely reversible. And this is what the selvage stitches look like on the wrong side. So let's get started and I'll demonstrate everything for you. So there are two videos. If you've clicked on the wrong one, this is the one with the English yarn hold, and there's also another one with the American yarn hold, so continental yarn hold, where you have the yarn in the left hand. So the wrap cast on, some people call it the disappearing loop cast on, and it is simple. So you wrap the yarn around a finger or around two fingers, you insert the needle into the loop, you knit one stitch out of that loop, then take the yarn forward, knit into the loop again, 3, take the yarn forward 4, and then knit one more time so that you have 5 loops on the hook, and then you can just take the loose end and make it disappear. So that's why it's called the disappearing loop cast on, and you have your 5 stitches. Now that's considered the right side, and then the setup row 2 is a wrong side row. So on the wrong sides, the selvage edge stitches are slipped purlwise with the yarn in front. The yarn goes back between the needles, and then you knit the next stitch. You take the yarn forward between the needles, slip the next loop purlwise. The yarn goes over that stitch. So these are the characteristic yarn overs from that is common to brioche stitch. You knit the next stitch, you take the yarn forward, and you slip the next selvage stitch purlwise with the yarn in front. Set up row 3 is a right-sided row. You knit the first stitch, the selvage edge stitch, then the yarn goes forward between the needles, and you slip the next stitch purlwise with the yarn, and the yarn goes over the needles when you then bark the next stitch. So bark is the abbreviation for brioche knit, and all that means is that you treat the stitch and the yarn over as one stitch and work them together. Then the yarn goes forward again and you slip the next stitch purlwise. The yarn goes over the needles when you knit the last stitch. So set up row 4, you slip the edge stitch purlwise on the wrong side, take the yarn between the needles, brioche knit the next stitch with its yarn over. The yarn comes forward, slip one purlwiser, and the yarn goes over the needles when you brioche knit the next stitch, and then yarn forward, slip the edge stitch purlwise. So it's starting to take shape. You can see one of these brioche columns forming in the middle. Row 1 has a 4-stitch increase in the middle. This video won't take you through the entire scarf step for step, but I will go through the first few rows, and then afterwards I'll skip and just show you the methods used in brioche knitting separately, and all of the methods that you need for this pattern. So row 1 goes as follows. You knit the edge stitch as normal, the yarn goes forward and you slip the next stitch purlwise. This is where you're going to perform the brioche 4-stitch increase into. So it's a knit stitch with a yarn over. You brioche knit or bark into that stitch. You don't slip it off the needles just yet. You take the yarn forward again, bark into it again, 3 loops, take the yarn forward and bark into it one more time, so that you have 5 loops on the hook. So where there was 1 stitch, there are now 5 loops, and that means that you've increased by 4 stitches. The yarn goes forward and you slip the next one purlwise, and then you knit the last stitch. Now these loops don't have any yarn overs, and so I'll show you how to work them on the wrong side. The selvage stitch is slipped, the yarn goes between the needles, then you have a brioche knit or bark there, and then when you bring the yarn forward you have now come to these 5 loops. So the first one is slipped with yarn in front, the next one is knitted, take the yarn forward, slip 1 purlwise, knit 1, yarn forward, slip 1, and then the rest of the row in the normal way, bark 1, slip edge stitch. So that was row 1. In one colour brioche stitch you don't need to use circular needles, you can use single pointed needles if you wish, because you turn after every row, and you would have one row where there is patterning such as an increase, and then the reverse row, and then a pair of rows where there's no patterning at all, and that corresponds to the wrong side rows when you're doing 2 colour brioche stitch. But just ignore that if you're not familiar with 2 colour brioche stitch at all. So brioche stitch knitted normally without any shaping, it's just a matter of slip 1, yarn over, bark 1, yarn forward, slip 1, yarn over, bark 1, slip 1, yarn over, bark 1, and then slip 1, yarn over, and the edge stitch is knitted. The wrong side row, slip 1 with yarn in front, take the yarn back, bark 1, yarn forward, slip 1, bark 1, yarn forward, slip 1, bark 1, yarn forward, slip 1, bark 1, and then you bring the yarn forward and slip the edge stitch. So now row 3 you would again have some shaping, and there'd be another brioche 4-stitch increase in the middle. So row 25 has just so much shaping in it, I can't help going through it with you. So knit the, slipped off the needle, knit the selvage stitch, yarn forward, slip 1, yarn over. Now this is a bark yarn over bark increase, so bark, yarn over, bark again, 3 loops, and then again a left slanting decrease. So the knit, after the slip 1 yarn over, there's a knit, purl and a knit stitch. You slip the first knit stitch with its yarn over as if to knit. You knit the next 3 loops together, so the knit stitch with the purl stitch and the yarn over makes up the 3rd loop, and then you take the slipped loop with yarn over and pass it over, and that is the left slanting decrease. Then it's yarn forward, slip 1, yarn over, bark 1, yarn forward, slip 1, yarn over, bark, yarn over, bark, and then again slip 1, yarn over, bark, yarn over, bark, and then slip 1, yarn over, bark. So when you get to the right slanting decrease, it's yarn forward, slip 1, yarn over, and you have a knit stitch with yarn over, you have a purl stitch in the middle, and another knit stitch with yarn over. So these 3 stitches are involved. So you've slipped the first knit stitch with its yarn over, you knit into the middle stitch, which is a purl stitch, you take the slipped stitch with its yarn over and pass it over that loop, and then transfer the loop to the left hand needle. You take the stitch to the left of it with its yarn over and pass it over that loop, and then take the loop back onto the right hand needle and snug up the yarn slightly, and that leans the stitch to the right. And then it's just a simple case of slip 1, yarn over, bark 1, yarn forward, slip one yarn over and knit the edge stitch. Now the last thing that I need to demonstrate is the Brioche 4-stitch decrease. This involves 5 loops and you need a stitch marker ideally. So I won't do it right at the very beginning, after all this is a selvage stitch, but after the slip one yarn over, it involves the next 5 stitches. So knit stitch with yarn over, that's stitch A, B, C, D and E. So you slip A and B as if to knit. You take the lockable stitch marker and put it through C with its yarn over, lock it tight and then slip it off and hang it to the front of the work. Then you knit stitch D. You take stitch B and pass it over that loop, then take the loop onto the left hand needle and take stitch E, which is a knit stitch with its yarn over, and pass it over the loop. You take the loop back onto the right hand needle and take stitch A with its yarn over and pass it over the loop. Then all that's left is stitch C with the sort of being held on the lockable stitch marker. You open it and put it back onto the left hand needle, and then you put the loop onto the left hand needle and pass stitch C with its yarn over that loop. Oh, I'm splitting the wool. And then you pass the loop onto the right hand needle and snug it up. And there is the Brioche 4-stitch decrease. For quite a while, when I knitted Brioche, I didn't bother blocking, but as you can see, if you do bother to block your scarf just by wetting it or washing it, and pinning it out when it's wet, pinning it flat and just putting pins in along the edges to stretch it slightly, then the Brioche stitch really comes into its own, and these gorgeous lines are visible very nicely, and also your sort of 3-dimensional shape to the leaf then lies flat. You can't notice that sort of bulge anymore. I hope you really enjoy this scarf, and I'll see you again if you purchase some more of my patterns. Thank you, bye.